Texas Lutheran University.
We are excited today to have one of our graduates back, Mr. Matt Klaser. He graduated in 2012, so he's been out in the workforce for the last 5 years. And so it was actually my idea to invite him back. I'll claim credit for that.
Appreciate it.
Because I thought he's got 5 years of experience. Now let's find out what it is that he's doing and put him on the spot here to show that he's making a contribution to society.
I am.
After all the work we put into him in the 4 years that he was here. So he graduated with a Bachelor of Science in environmental biology, and he was also a dedicated member of the drama department, dramatic media, right?
Quite dramatic.
So he was in a bunch of plays and stuff like that. He's actually been doing a little bit of acting since then, but he's not really hit the big screen in Hollywood yet. But you never know. All right? So give a warm welcome to Matt Klaser.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Dr. Justin, for inviting me. Like you said, I have not made it to Hollywood yet. With my extensive environmental research and work and stuff, I probably won't ever. But anyways, my name is Matt Klaser. I am an environmental consultant with a company called Power Engineers. I used to work for a company called Zephyr, and we recently got acquired by Power. That just means that we work for them now. All right, so firstly today we're going to talk about kind of just like my background, what I did, what I like, stuff like that. Then we're going to talk about professions that you can do in the environmental field that I've come across. What stormwater is, and that's particularly the field that I work in. What consulting is, which is what I do more specifically. How you can get involved in this sort of field or even in your own communities. The challenges and rewards that come along with this type of work. And then a nice summary, and thank you for you guys listening to me talk. So background, I genuinely love nature. I've been outside in, I don't know, the woods outside my house for forever. And so that really instilled in me through like those experiences and with Boy Scouts and other stuff like that, that the natural world is something worth preserving. And it's definitely something that I was at least interested in by the time I entered college. When I entered college, I thought I wanted to go pre-optometry because they made money. And after realizing how much work goes into that sort of field and how much school and everything like that, it wasn't for me. So I took some ecology classes with Dr. Gustafson and other professors like Dr. Levens, and I realized that I really enjoy being outside. I really enjoy looking at nature and specimens that are out there and ways that I can be better to the world. When I was in my junior year, I got a surf internship that's summer undergraduate research focus, and that's where I met Morgan, my wife right there, who runs the CSL. Just a little shout out, there we are right there, and there's my awesome abs. And that's really, I did a lot of marine research. I was doing shark distribution patterns. I was catching pup sharks, tagging them, seeing where they went in the Gulf, and basically, when they would get recaptured, we would say, okay, they've gone this many kilometers. Their breeding ground must be somewhere in this area. We want to know why they're going this way. Is it temperatures? Is it food? What is it about? So that's what my research was on for that summer, and that's what I did my senior seminar capstone on. I thought very naively that because I had worked in a lab, that meant that I was going to get into grad school and I was going to be a researcher. I didn't get in. And when you don't get in to grad school and you're out of college, you gotta go to work. So I started out not really knowing what to do with my life, what to do with my career, or like what options were even available to me as a biology graduate. So my first job was working at Holiday Inn. I was the night guy and I was the breakfast guy. And if you really want to find what you want to do, work at Holiday Inn because you'll want to do anything else. So after roughly 100 applications, I mean, I really did span the area looking for work. I took the first job that I got, which is stormwater inspections, and we'll talk about that a little bit more coming up. And that job really, I won't say it like framed what I would do with my career. It really just opened up the idea of what is out there for work, because I didn't really know. A little bit more background. Personally, I went to Georgetown High School up the road, up 35, outside of Austin. I graduated from here in 2012. Like I said, I got a marine biology internship when I was in my junior year, and that was a lot of fun. I recommend internships as much as possible as a way to just experience other things in the world outside of your little scope. I had graduated, like I said, with my environmental biology degree and a dramatic media minor, which haven't really done much with that dramatic media other than like small little hobbies here and there, but that's not important. I got my first inspection job with a company called Compliance Resources, and that job was very like, we need a warm body to go do these inspections. And it was very hands-off. It was a job that did not require a lot of managerial oversight and was very much, you go to these construction sites, you inspect the stormwater and the controls, and then you write a report on it. Then you go to the next site. And a job like that doesn't have a lot of managerial need so much. You're kind of just a warm body to go walk a site. And with that company, I got a CESSWI certification, or a CESSWI IT certification. The IT stands for in training, but CESSWI is Certified Erosion Sediment Stormwater Inspector. And that opens up more industry type work once you have more certifications, like any other job. The more certified you get, the more hireable you are. So after I got my certification, I left in early 2014 for a different company. And I thought it would be a whole new opportunity. I was making a little more money, and turns out it was even more hands-off. My boss was up in Washington, I think, and I was the only person that worked in Texas for a little while. So when you have that kind of work environment, it's a little hard to see a bigger picture of what the work is and what the body of work can be. So I really learned that I need some sort of managerial or some sort of coworker input with my day-to-day work to make myself feel valued. And once I left again to a different company where I'm working now with Zephyr, I really got that satisfaction of, I don't know, feeling valued. I wasn't just boots on the ground to do an inspection. I stepped more into a consultant role, and I have a much bigger responsibility list, and I feel more valued as a person, and I'm a lot happier now. So it's just something to think about. It totally does make a difference how you're treated at your job and how you do your work. With my this latest job, I got my full CESSWI certification. Many cities and regions require different certifications to be a worker in that area. And to get those certifications, you'll have to go through like an NGO, like EnviroCert, I think, is the one who put on CESSWI, yeah. And it's just an NGO, and they have nationwide recognition as a good provider of certifications. So, types of environmental careers. There are academia, obviously, like you see all your professors here. You can do teaching. Dr. G teaches a fantastic environmental biology class. Dr. Levens teaches a plant biology class. Dr. Grove, I don't really know what you teach, I apologize, but she teaches stuff as well. Do research, you can do that through internships, or you can, I did an independent study course with Dr. Gustafson for a semester, and that was really beneficial for me to see that, yes, I do enjoy working, not necessarily by myself, but I enjoy working in a situation where I can be out in the field, where I can go have work that's not sitting in an office, sitting in a cubicle under fluorescent lighting. I really instilled that idea that I like being outside. I want to work outside. I don't want to work inside. What I do is I do consulting, and that involves client relations, inspecting, problem solving, and just a bit of everything else. As a consultant, you kind of have to know a little bit about everything, or at least have access to a coworker who knows something that you don't know. And in this industry, there's always someone that knows. And if they're not in the company you work for, you can find them in a different company. And I mean, they'll charge you money because you're a consultant going to another consultant, but it's a thing. Inspection/monitoring, this is what I did as my first couple jobs. I would go out and inspect the stormwater area which again we'll get into in a little bit, but you don't have to do stormwater. There's also air. I got a buddy who works for the TCEQ, and he'll go out and do air monitoring. The TCEQ, if you don't know, that's the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. That's the statewide regulation on environmental rules. It's mainly enforcement and regulation. They don't do so much like day-to-day work. They're a government entity. Yeah, I have another friend that works in radioactivity and asbestos, and it's just another way of monitoring what the past has done and how you can move forward in the future. So a lot of these, like I'm sure, I won't say that. Possibly this building is built with asbestos, possibly not. I'm not here to speculate that judgment, but there would be someone whose job it would be to come through and determine that. And if it is, they'll make a ruling on it, and if it's something with a government entity, then they'll act on that. If it's just someone who's doing inspecting as part of a private sector job, they'll inform whoever is in charge of the building, and they'll say, if you want to be in compliance with regulations, with health codes, this needs to happen. And that's what consulting is. You're just telling someone, this needs to happen. I can't do it for you, but this is the situation you're in. In this same field of environmental work, you can do something like natural resource management. My company does a lot of that. We have a specific team for natural resources. I've been on a wetland delineation survey, and that's basically what it sounds like. You're going out, walking a large tract of land, and you're looking for wetlands. And if you find one, you mark it on a map, and then you take that information back to your office, and you best find the way to impact it in the most effective way, or not at all, depending on what is in that wetland, what area of work is happening, whatever. Wildlife survey, my company did inspections on lady tresses. That's what these are. They're a more rare plant, and I believe Dr. Liebens was talking to me about a biodiversity class that was started, and that's kind of what you're looking for. You're monitoring a specific area for a specific type of organism to see how your work would, again, impact that community. And if it's in a negative way, or if it's in a way that would hurt the population, and it's a more rare sort of specimen, it'll be stricter regulations. There will be other ordinances that need to follow. Yeah, and we also do karst monitoring. I don't even know what karst is, but karsts are like caves. So whenever you go, or a company wants to go build an apartment complex, in order to do that, you have to break ground. And when you break ground, there's always a chance, if you're in a certain zone, that there's caves underneath. And once there's caves underneath, you have things that are like the cave spiders, the salamanders. And you hear a lot of people that aren't too environmentally friendly be like, oh, we have to stop work for this stupid spider. Yeah, you do, unless you don't want it to go extinct, which, again, goes back to that whole love of preservation of nature that I have. So there's always little things about the work that make it matter more than others. If you look up here on the graphic, you kind of got a little representation of what stormwater is, more or less. You have this pollutant, and it's going through the stages of the ground and in through the underground, the aquifer area, and then that will eventually lead to a water body. And that's where I primarily come in, because when you're looking at water, you want to use water for everything. You want your water to be free of nutrients, free of pollutants, and as pristine as possible so it can be used for multiple things like recreation, drinking, sanitation, whatever. So when you have a big polluter, you have to they're strictly monitored so that this area doesn't become impacted and this area doesn't become impacted so bad that you have situations like in Flint where all of the water was just rusty and full of bacteria and terrible and people died. So that's the extreme end of bad, whereas the extreme end of good is like Barton Springs. It's so clear and beautiful and clean. It's nice. Oh, back one. Okay. You can also work, like I said, for the government. I would like to work for the government at some point in my life, mainly because it's a very stable job. You, as a government employee, you can basically work there forever and, just persist as a government employee. However, there are certain drawbacks, pay-wise or feeling of usefulness, like I was talking about earlier. But there are different areas you can work in the government, like regulations, enforcement, and permitting. So when I have a project that's a gas line being installed, I have to go onto the EPA website, fill out an application to have a permit for my client to do work here. So the government has a very hands-on knowledge of what's happening at all times. If something's being built, there's definitely an entity that knows about it. And for my line of work, if it's a gas line, I report it to the EPA. If it's a electrical utility easement, that'll be notified to the TCEQ. I don't totally understand why there's not more communication between the states and the federal level, because it seems like there'd be a way to streamline everything through one system, but there's a notorious lack between those two divisions of labor. You can do sustainability management, and that's that's trying to maintain a certain area that you have. So I know Dr. Gustafson does a lot of bamboo and ligustrum clearing. That would count as sustainability management. You're managing an area to make it more sustainable, getting rid of invasive species and trying to let native species thrive. Or it could be you're trying to find the best way to power an area with solar panels. So you would need to manage a certain area because you don't want to have trees there. You would have to uproot those and make sure that nothing grows big enough to block the impact to the solar panels. That's just a small example. Engineering, you can go into environmental engineering, and those would be the people that design like all the improvements outside TLU, the little basins, the easements, the trenches, the little culverts you see that go below the roads. That was designed by an engineer whose whole job was to look at the best way to have the smallest effect on the environment while still maintaining the idea that there's going to be X amount of rain coming through here. So you have to think about the slope of the ground. You have to think about what the work is going to be done and where the water is going to go afterwards. And again, there are other things besides stormwater. There's like air and all kinds of other things that you would have to take into account. But I work primarily with stormwater engineers. You can go into law, and that would be, you could either do something like defending the environment, or more likely, you would go into something along the lines of just interpreting what the rules are and seeing how you can best work within those limitations for a client. And there are other jobs as well, but I couldn't think of them, so they're et cetera. Now, let's talk about what is stormwater. Stormwater is what it sounds like. It's any snow, ice, water precipitation that comes from the sky, it lands on the ground, and it goes into the ground to a certain destination. It is the movement of pollutants from a source receiving waterways, point source or non-point source. Point source would be like if there's a pipe, and all the water is coming out of there, and you can see that the pollutants are coming from there, that's a point source. Whereas if you have a large area where you have 3 or 4 different block size areas contributing to one outfall, that would be a non-point source because you can't identify that specific spot where the pollutant is coming from. However, not all stormwater is bad. I kind of painted this light of stormwater being managing pollutants, and it is, but stormwater is also very important to maintain the aquifers. So I don't know if we are in a zone here in Seguin, but I know in the hill country there are contributing zones and recharge zones, and what's the last one called? I can't think of it. It starts with an A. That's where the water would come up. So you would go to, what is it?
Artesian.
There it is, artesian zone. It would first go into a contributing zone, the water would, and that would infiltrate through limestone, through the soils, and then it would slope down and drain into the aquifer recharge zone, which is where the Edwards Aquifer in particular gets all its water from. So again, it's not bad to have stormwater, it's just good, it's bad to have dirty stormwater. And then after it goes to the recharge zone, it comes up to the artesian zone, and that's where we have springs and lakes and rivers and stuff like that. Mainly what I do is I monitor sedimentation and nutrient cycles in the water flow. So sedimentation is if it rains and upslope, there's just a bunch of dirt. And it comes down and it fills up a BMP, which is a best management practice. With sediment, that's sedimentation. Or if dirt falls into a creek and the creek becomes 2 feet more shallow, that's sedimentation. Nutrient cycles are also important because if you see here, nutrients aren't necessarily good things. There could be pollutants, it could be oils, it could be pet waste, whatever. If you see here, it would run off here, and it would go into the inlet, and it would go through a sewer to an outlet to a water body. So when you're looking at water bodies, you have to realize that they come from somewhere. All the water that goes there comes from somewhere. So if you know that there's a big oil stain over here, and the next week that oil stain is not there, but there's an inlet right there, there's probably a pretty good chance that the nutrients from that oil are now in the water body, in which case you have to go through a different type of inspection and cleanup, and that's just a whole different field. And water flow. If you look at this last picture, this is a culvert. If you see here, these little squares, those are velocity dissipators. They slow down the water as it's leaving a site, so that whenever a water leaves a tunnel, it's not just plowing through and eroding an area. You have something like velocity dissipators that slow it down and make it a slower trickle. This picture was taken from an outfall on site. As you can see, the water is nice and brown, and there's vegetation growing all around here. That's bad. Whenever you have situations like this, it leads to floods in streets. So whenever you see a community, or you hear about a community, a neighborhood, that the bottom part of the street is just washed out, people are mad, it's because the outfall is clogged. And there needs to be some guy with a shovel that goes out there and removes the sediment and the dirt and the grass and everything, and allows the water to properly drain out of a neighborhood. Without that, you're kind of in a bad spot. And it's one of the main things that regulators look for when they're going out to inspect a site for compliance. I also had a good bit of time in my years so far in this field to learn about the regulations and the rules that can affect certain sites and the ecosystems. So rules are a very important part of this whole job. The regulations, without them, there's no one really to enforce anything. So if you're not following the rules, there's a very good chance that a regulator could come down and enforce some sort of regulation. And as an example, Walmart, like 10 years ago or so, they were in a pretty bad spot with the EPA because they were building on areas and they were not maintaining any stormwater controls, they weren't maintaining their outfalls, and it was really bad, and it hurt the environment really badly. So the EPA put them under a notice that they had to maintain certain regulations, and they were monitored on a certain amount by the government to make sure they were following this. And if they didn't, they would be fined an amount per day. So not per workday, but per day. So it could be something like, $200 every day that this isn't fixed. Or in the case of Walmart, it could be a couple $100,000 per day until these problems are fixed. What inspections are in stormwater, my parts of it, you have to know what a SWP3 is and all of the aspects that go into it. SW3P is a stormwater pollution prevention plan, and every site that has broken ground has one. So if you're ever wondering where does all this, how does the book look? There is a book in an office for every site that has inspection records. It has logs of changing gradients, logs of different work and different supplies and crews that were out there. And it's a very meticulously detailed living document so that people know what's happening on the site, who the operator is, who's got control of the area. You will monitor site conditions and the BMP maintenance. So BMPs, like I said, are best management practices, and they can be anything from structural to an idea. So if you look here, this is hydroseed. This is a post-completion BMP. So after a ground is loamed and the work is complete, they need to stabilize the area. If they don't stabilize the area, all the dirt could wash away, and they would have to, again, come back in and regrade it. So if you stabilize it by means of grass or some sort of other erosion control or hydroseed, it will stabilize over and the work will be complete and the site will be in compliance once again. Hydroseed is one of the things that, because it's a grass seed, you have to water. So I took this picture 2 weeks ago. I went there again this past week and it was all brown. It was all gross and all dead. They didn't water it, and they're gonna have to spend more money now to come back out, respray the hydroseed, and get a watering truck. And if they had just done it correctly in the first place, it wouldn't be a problem. Other types of BMPs are things like this. This is an inlet This is filter fabric on top of it. Filter fabric is fabric that will allow water to seep through, but at the same time it's porous enough to let water through, but not porous enough to let sediment through. So eventually, if not maintained, this will just fill up with dirt. And it will need to be cleaned out, and it will need to be maintained. And the sandbags potentially will get damaged as well. They're bags of sand. So of course, if they get damaged, there's sand everywhere now. Don't love them. But this is a good representation of what a pristine piece of filter fabric should look like. It's not always this. There are other ways of inlet protections, but the concept is still the same. We don't do corrective work as an inspector. If I see that an inlet that should be right here is over there on the ground, I cannot ethically go pick up that inlet and put it back in there. That's not my job. That's someone else's job to do that. My job is just to look at it. So my job is very hands-off on the site. I'm very much like, fix it. That's my job. And then I put it in writing. We observe outfalls, and where the water goes, like I was talking about earlier, all water that leaves a site goes somewhere. No water just stays. So when you're looking at an outfall, you need to, when you're writing the SWIP actually, you need to look at receiving waters. So you check out your outfall and you see, okay, this is going to go to Lower Cibolo Creek after going through a tributary. So if you know that Lower Cibolo Creek has no other contributing factors except for this one area of work, then a regulator could come through and say, this water is dirty, you guys are the one upstream doing this, it's coming from you, and we're going to fine you. So that's kind of on a regulatory standpoint where I come through with outfalls. Like I said before, I tell people to fix it and I write it down. Everything has to be in writing. If it's not in writing, anyone will not accept it. If it's not written down, it's not recorded, and no one has any responsibility to fix anything. At the end of an inspection, I compile a complete report, and that report will go to the person that pays our bills, and they will potentially do something with it. They don't have to. They can give it to their contractor, and the contractor will say, okay, and never touch it again. But that's their choice. It's not up to us. We are simply there to inspect. We will then discuss all the findings with a point of contact on site. That'll usually be a site supervisor, a foreman, or some other representative of the company. That's just good skills to have if you're talking to someone. Like, a lot of times with this type of work, people don't know what you do. To be fair, I didn't know what this job was when I graduated. I kind of just fell into it. So having that open line of communication with someone who does pay the bills is really beneficial, and you can convince them that if they aren't fixing the problem, they should be, because this is why. With an inspection schedule, it's usually more relaxed. So when I first started inspecting with Compliance Resources, I would do 4 days a week of inspections, and the 5th day I would go into the office. Now those 4 days that I would go inspect, I would work maybe 6 hours, tops. And then I would go back to my home, because there's not really much to do other than drive, inspect, write a report, and if there's no office to go to for that, or that you need to go to, you're just done for the day. And I did that for a few years, and it was a very easy schedule. The pay wasn't the best, but it was a very easy schedule, and it was a good way to see what the industry was. Now we're talking a little bit about what consulting is. A consultant is someone that provides expertise in a field. So I know stormwater. I would be considered a stormwater professional. If someone needs stormwater work, they could come to me, and I could consult on their project and give them adequate information. You typically work as an extension of your client's environmental staff. Right now, one of the big projects we have is a large utility provider in San Antonio. Due to ethical reasons, I can't say who. And they don't have an environmental team, or they don't want to hire one. So they'll hire a consulting company, and we will go out and do that environmental work for them so that they don't have to do it. That's kind of the whole purpose of it. It's doing stuff that other people don't want to do. We try to meet our clients' needs as best as possible. They pay us. Even if we don't agree with the way that they're doing things, the format of their plans, or the layout of the work, if they pay the bills, they are telling us what to do. There are certain limits to that. They can't make you sign off on something that isn't sign-offable, because that's illegal. However, if they say, we don't want to do that, I can't say, I'm going to make you. They just aren't going to do that. They pay the bills. Winning projects is another part that my higher up manager does. He does a lot of ops and just company things. So whenever you are a consultant, your firm will have to bid on certain projects through certain companies. So like, say a construction company like Joris, they're a pretty big developer. They'll say on their website, they say, we have these projects opening up for these positions as contractors or consultants, whatever. Start bidding. So at that point, someone like my manager would come through and say, okay, we'll bill this much, we're willing to work for this long, and these are the rates that our people will be at. And they can either negotiate from there or talk or whatever. But when you win a project, that's good, because usually they're in big year amounts. So like this utility provider that we got, it's a 4-year contract for over $2 million, which coming from a guy that just drove around primarily for his job, it's a big deal for me. So I really want to work to maintain that relationship with my client so that I can better myself as well as them and work for a more compliant environment. Project management is a big part of this. Budget, billability, and project status monitoring are all pretty huge concepts that go into environmental consulting. Everything that I do needs to be written down in a timesheet so that they can know this project I spent an hour on. Okay, we'll bill it at this rate for this amount of time. Or they can say, my manager worked on this project. She's much more expensive than me. She charges this much for the project. Maybe we don't want her on that because she's so expensive. Maybe we want to have a low admin guy who's worth half of what the inspector's worth to do the grunt work. And that's just something you have to think about as a project manager. You have to make sure you're billable. So everything that I do should be based around the client work. So after this presentation, I'm going to go back, hop on my computer, and write some more plans. I'm going to do other things that I can contribute to the client to make them more happy, keep the work flowing. And we are working to create a solution to a problem or situation that a client might have. So if, like with Walmart, they were out of compliance with the stormwater stuff, they had to hire a stormwater consulting firm to monitor them to make sure that they were not biased and creating a solution that's feasible to Walmart to get something fixed. We're on time. Cool. We try to help our clients and work with what their needs are. Like I said before, there are limitations, but we like to tell them if they say they have an area of impact that's downslope, we can't say install this one type of product because that would be product placement and that would be bias. You would say you can install a BMP sediment control such as silt fence, a rock berm, a wattle, whatever. But the point is to give them options so that we aren't deciding their work for them. They are the ones that need to decide what work needs to be done. We're just there to give them options for it. Ethical considerations are a big part of consulting. Primarily, one of the biggest aspects is just to do the right thing. So if you know that this waterway is being impacted and your site foreman comes to you and says, okay, I know it's bad, but I'll give you $100 and you don't write it up. That's not the right thing. You shouldn't take the money. You should probably write it up anyways and possibly report him, depending on how much he pays your company. Stealing clients is a big problem in this industry as well because it is a smaller industry. I worked with a lot of home builders with my last jobs, and it would be unethical for me to go to those home builders and say, oh, I'm working with this company now. You should hire us. Here's my business card. Here's why we're better. I know this about my old company, and this is terrible. I do this much better with this new company, and we're a much better fit for you. You can't do that. However, if I was to go to my old clients, give them a business card and say, I work here now, and then leave, it's up to them. If they choose to leave their current contractor and come to us, then that's totally ethical, and there's no bridges crossed there, and there's no overlap from the other companies. Like I was talking about earlier, there's bias towards certain products. So all these BMPs are made by a company. Someone makes them. So I can't say erosion control blankets. Have you guys ever seen those? They're big green rolls that you see like along the sides of highways. I don't know if it's familiar at all, but that's called a geotextile or a erosion control blanket. However, the biggest distributor of that is Kerlix. So a lot of times you'll hear people say on site, oh yeah, we put some Kerlix down there. I can't say, oh, I'm glad you put that Kerlix there. I could say, that's a really good erosion control blanket. I would have to be more general. I can't just specifically say, that's a great product. That's not good. That creates bias and it makes it look like I'm making favoritism towards a certain company. Signing off on something was what I was talking about before. And that was like, if the guy was to say, sign off my report that I'm okay and I'll give you $100. Again, not the right thing, you shouldn't do it. However, if you do that and you get caught doing that, there are legal ramifications. Like there are people who have gone to jail for signing off on environmental compliance reports. So it's something to be wary about, especially if you're working for a contractor that's under regulation from the government. They're going to be looking at everything you do. So if you're signing off that this is completed and that this waterway is clean and the sediment's staying in their yard, but it's not, you're the one who's liable for that because you are the one who wrote down everything. So again, if you're writing everything down and you're following the right ethical rules, nothing bad will happen to you. It'll happen to the person who's paying you, unless you step over that boundary of signing off on things. Only do the prescribed work. So that's like what I was talking about before, how I can't go fix the sediment control. It's a lot of times they'll give you a scope of work in the proposal for what your job is, and you are to stick to that schedule only. If you take the liberty to go outside and above and beyond, if it's positive for the client, great. But a lot of times you aren't being paid for that. That's not in your scope of work. And that's just free work that you're doing, which you should never do anything for free unless you're volunteering. CSL. Yes, and being completely transparent. You need to be very upfront with what's going on with your clients, what's going on the sites, and who you're talking with, and stuff like that. If you aren't and you're being very veiled and misty, the people that pay you have every right to say, we don't want to pay you anymore, you're fired. And that's something that does happen. So you need to make sure that you're upfront with what's going on, and that goes back to the whole talking to your point of contact on site. Because once they know what's going on, and you're being very upfront about site conditions, they'll be more comfortable to talk with you and work with you. How to get involved. This is a topic that I care more about than I probably should. You would need a biological degree to get into my field. A lot of times they look for environmental science, or I know that TLU doesn't have an environmental science degree, but I took an environmental biology degree as my course of study, and it worked out great. A lot of these jobs in this field of work won't look at you unless you've got some sort of environmental or similar degree. And if you don't, I mean, maybe you're just an awesome person and you've got a great interview skills. I don't know. You have to have a passion and a background in environmental science. You can't just think that, okay, this is what I want to do because I like working and I like money. That's not a very good reason, and you won't last very long. You're pretty burnt out. You'll start out in a field position role, usually, which is something like what I was doing with just inspections. It's a very low managerial need job, but still has a very heavy impact on the company. So it needs to be done. And like I said with billability, if someone is more expensive than someone else, you want to send the cheap guy out there so that your project has more budget to complete other aspects of a project, be it permit writing or whatever. Volunteering in your community. I know that I've sat in a few interviews myself, and it really matters if you've shown that you are willing to work for free. If you're willing to get outreach in the community, work to better something, people care. That genuinely does matter. I've got a good amount of volunteer hours under my belt, and I'm not ashamed of it. If you do need more volunteer options, I would recommend going to see Morgan at the CSL. She has plenty of ways to get involved through other NGOs and stuff like that. Everything you do, put it on your resume. You don't want to bog your resume down with like the little minutia of what went on, but if you were part of a volunteer effort to clean up the highway that met every month and you worked for 2 hours, you can put that on there, monthly cleanup with X organization for whatever reason. Internships help a lot as well. It really shows that you're willing to do the work if you're willing to intern. I mean, a lot of times they offer paid internships, which is what I had in Corpus, but most of the time it's unpaid. And yes, it is low-level work, but that's where everybody starts. So I recommend getting out there and just seeing what you like. An internship would be a really good way to see if the field is a good fit for you, or to see if you even like working in an office, or if you want to not be a coffee boy, or if you want to, whatever. An internship is a good way to get experience into that. And lastly, networking. The more people you know, especially in a field that's small, like stormwater, is really important. So the lady that hired me with my company right now, I didn't remember, but she remembered me that I took a class she taught 4 years ago. And I didn't make that connection until after I was hired, but she said, oh yeah, I knew you. I knew that you worked for this company, I knew they hired good people, and I had a good feeling. So again, it matters. Who you know matters, and the more people you know, especially in the industry, the better. So some challenges that come along with consulting, deadlines. People want stuff on a timetable. We have a large client that does petroleum industry, and they'll sometimes say, we need a report this week or tomorrow, in which case some things will have to drop by the wayside as the new priorities come up. And that's just part of the whole management of your project. Clients can be difficult. Sometimes they can want 3 or 4 things and they want them now or yesterday, or why aren't you doing them now, or why didn't you do it yesterday, or whatever. They're just mad that you aren't perfect. And that's just part of the work, because it's what they want to do. They want to have the best product for their company, and they want to know why you're holding them up. If they're paying you, you should be perfect. Working with federal and state local regulations, each smaller level, so local is more stringent than state, state is more stringent than federal. However, they do not talk. So if you file a permit with somebody through the state of Texas, you can't go to the EPA and say, oh yeah, I filed this permit with the state of Texas, don't you know about it? They don't know, they don't care. That's not their area of work. So that means you have to do, if something is a gas and utility line per se, or a gas line and electric line per se, then you would have to file a permit with the state and with the EPA. And in that regard, they're not going to talk to each other, but you have to talk with both of them. Billability, something like this that I'm doing right now is not billable to a certain client. This gets charged to the overhead of the company, so the company is paying me for this. However, that's not the way you should work as a consultant. You should always be working to make money for your company. I work in the private sector. The public sector would be something like the government, something that elected official, whatever. If you're in the private sector, you have more freedom because you're under the eye of the scrutiny of public image, the government, whatever, and you also have more company backing. And it's just something that you have to take into consideration, that you're not enforcement, you're not regulation, you're private sector. Legal, like I said before, if you're signing off on a document, that's you. Your company's not going to go down for that, you're going to go down for that. And you've agreed to it on every single report that you write. There's a little box that says, by signing this, you are the responsible authority. It's kind of scary. Time management was a big problem for me. I really had to sit down and get a planner and a calendar and figure out how I'm going to spend my hours each day. And if I'm not spending them in a constructive way, I need to reevaluate my schedule. And that was something that I've struggled with for a long time because I am notoriously counterproductive. A lot of people in this industry see stormwater consulting as an evil because they're costing them money, they're taking time away from other work that needs to be done. If they break ground and there's a cave, that means that work has to stop, and that means they can't get done and nobody gets paid. However, like I said before, I care about the world, so they can wait, and that's seen as an evil. So I say it's a necessary evil. And with consulting, there is a more stringent routine because, like I was saying earlier, there's deadlines, there's projections, there's clients you have to talk to, and if you're not managing your time effectively, you're going to get swallowed up. However, there are rewards to this job. It is a very fast-paced job. I've been working for this company for about 7 months now, and I I've been just so burdened with work that I haven't really noticed that 7 months went by. I've gone through a lot of different projects, started and closed a lot of different projects, and I feel great about it. It's just a very fast-paced job, very different from just inspecting. The pay is better in the private sector than the government sector. That's just true, always. And in the environmental field, you're not going to get paid millions of dollars for anything unless you're like a company yourself. So where pay is better is the private sector. I have a consistent schedule. I go out Tuesday through Thursday to do my inspections. Monday and Friday, I'm in the office writing plans, talking with clients, wheeling dealing. Like I said before, the more people you know, the better. So with this company, I'm going to conferences. There are other ways I can meet people in the industry. And like I was saying before, if I don't know something, there are now people that I can call, and through good faith, I wouldn't have to pay them if I knew them or if I was friends with them, whatever, they'll help me out. That's an important part of this, and it's good just to build you up. I don't want to do stormwater forever. I'd like to get into natural resources, do some more biodiversity monitoring, and things along that nature, which my company does offer. It's just, like I was saying, with the billability and time management, they have to figure out a way to get a new guy in there. They got to train the new guy. They got to spend their time and resources to get all that done, while at the same time charging money to that project because I'm not free, like any other consultant. So it's just something that's a very slow process, but it is entirely possible. I work with experts in the field. I've learned more through this job than I have through other jobs. I've learned more about regulations and about other geological things that I didn't have a geology class here. I don't know if you all have a geology class now, but I didn't know anything about soils. I thought soil was just small rocks. And I mean, it kind of is, but there's just other aspects to it. Working with different projects really buffs up your resume. Like I was saying before, with this big project that I have, having a $2 million plus project under my belt that I've been the primary contact on will look good to basically anyone who wants to hire me for later work or hire the company for later work. All right, as a summary, I have a background in environmental biology. I love the natural world. The stormwater inspection job was the first job I got, and that was kind of just how I got into the industry. I didn't have any real feasible idea of what it was, but now I do. Inspections, when I was talking to my boss about it, I was saying how I was in the inspection world, and that was like a really small corner of just the scope of what it was. And he says, no, that's being in a box in the corner of what the whole field was. And it's true, it's very true. I've learned a lot more, and this whole field of work is gigantic, things you can do. With my career, I kind of grew into being a full consultant. I started out stormwater. I started out just inspecting, having no responsibility, and just being a guy that was a warm body to do the inspections. Now I am a vital part of this company that I work for, and they genuinely need me, which is a good feeling to have. I plan to get future certifications. There are other things that EnviroCert puts out and other NGOs put out that will just make me look better. And the more certifications I get, the better I'll be equipped for the future. And a lot of times companies will pay for your certification because they want you to be better so that they can charge more for you. So all part of the plan. I can use the knowledge and the skills I've gained to make myself better in the future. Like I said with the certifications, the more you do, the more you know, and the more you become certified. More letters after your name, the better. As a quick little bit of notice, everything you should be doing should be building your resume. If you're volunteering, put it on your resume. If you've just even done a small bit of research with Dr. Gustafson, Levens, or Grove, or any professor here, put it on your resume. It makes you stand out more than you need to. 2 to 5 years in any field is the standard usually. If you've been at one job for 1 year, another job for another year, another job for another year, that's going to make you look really inconsistent. If you have, I've gone through in this 5 to 6 years I've been, this is my 3rd job. I spent 2 years at the first 2, and I'm on my almost first half year with this 2nd job. So that was a pretty good transition time for me. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Yeah, we have 5 minutes for questions.
No?
Well, I'm curious about the field work that you do.
Sure.
You go out on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, I think you said. What do you actually do in the field, and what kind of skills do you bring with you in the field, and what are you looking for?
So when I go,
To develop your report.
yes, so when I go out into a field, I'm looking at these BMPs. I'm looking at the area of work, either on a common plan of development, like a huge development, or I'll be looking at a small neighborhood or something. And my course of work is to go through, see what condition the BMPs are in. If it's silt fence, if there's holes in it, that's not going to hold the water back. That needs to be repaired. Or if the water going to a rock berm has filled up the rock berm and it's full of sediment, I would record that as a way that sedimentation is happening and clean water is not getting through that area. It's going to pool up and it's going to just flood the entire area. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. I'm looking for water impacts on site and the controls that maintain the water flow to a more precise area. Something like your little garden that you are building out there, the filter fabric and the slopes, that's going to all go to that one low spot. That's an example of a BMP, a best management practice.
Great presentation. I can't tell you how important your work is.
I appreciate
I
that.
live up in San Marcos, right on Purgatory,
Yeah,
and I have a tendency to hike back in there and look at all the bat caves.
yeah.
And there's some unscrupulous people that want to put apartments up there,
Mm-hmm.
or put a 1,500 home division with an 18-hole golf course
I'm familiar.
over the recharge. So,
Yep.
So they look at people like you and me as bad people.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, they build these places, and before someone like you goes in, they fill in the holes of the bat cave. So when he goes there, oh, there's no bats here anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So this is due diligence. We're the biggest group of, San Marcos is the fastest growing city in America, that whole thing, and it's all on this important land. So I see jobs of what you're doing and what you may want to do as the guardians of the water for the future. So congratulations.
I appreciate that.
Work.
Yeah. If anyone is interested, I have business cards. I'm not totally sure about internships with my company. However, my office has been open to the idea. If you want to take a business card, please do. You can send me an email with your resume. I'd be happy to send it on to someone else, or anything that I can come up with for you.
All right, thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
For more information, please visit tlu.edu.